Hello yogins, welcome back for another yin yoga class. This one I just call basic yin, this sequence. And in this sequence we do butterfly and dragonfly. This is to target our adductors, bring our spine into flexion, and target the kidney, bladder, and liver meridians. Then we do Bananasana or banana pose. That brings our spine into what's called lateral flexion. It also stretches our obliques, intercostals, and targets the gallbladder meridian. We have Sphinx seal or saddle bridge, that option, and this brings our spine into extension. It stretches the rectus abdominis and gets the stomach and spleen meridians. And then finally we have twisted roots at the end. It brings our spine into rotation, and twists are just a great way to finish off a yoga practice. A teacher I really admire named Rod Stryker says they're the most spiritual of asanas, and you might feel that just a great way to finish your practice off and to go into Shavasana or Pentacle for a deeper relaxation and meditation. So I really hope you enjoy this class. I want to thank all of my patrons on Patreon who make this possible by contributing, and everyone who's contributed via Venmo and PayPal. Thank you so much. So enjoy the class and let me know what you think by commenting. Please subscribe if you're on YouTube and hit the bell icon if you want updates on new videos. Thank you so much. Namaste. Let's start with a butterfly pose. And to do the butterfly, you just join the soles of your feet together. And then what you'd like is, there are two basic options for butterfly. One is heels in, nice and close, dropping the knees down and coming forward. And the stretch is in here. It's in your groin, the inside of the thighs. And then if you push your feet out and come forward, it targets your back more. So there's a little bit more of a back stretch, okay? So either one is correct, and any position between the two extremes is also correct. Okay, so don't feel like there's one right way to do this. Now as you come into the posture, you might find that it is a little too much for you, meaning it doesn't feel safe. So if this is the case, you can see I have a couple of blocks under my forearms. That is an option for a little bit of extra support. Other people might like to do something like this, a block under the forehead. Again, that supports the upper body, makes it just a little bit less intense. Others might prefer blocks under knees if you aren't doing the groin stretch. If you're trying to stretch your groin, this is probably not a good idea because it will prevent you from getting the stretch in here. Part of the stretch comes from the knees dropping, being pulled by gravity. Okay, so but if you aren't, if you're focused more on your back, this is can be a good option if you're feeling sensitive in here. And then finally, you could sit on a block as well, and that might push you forward a little more aggressively if that's a challenge for you. Otherwise, we're going to be here for a full 5 minutes, which I like to call the gold standard in yin yoga. And we're about a minute and a half in, so we've got about 3.5 minutes left here. Okay, so gradually coming up, we'll transition to another posture and then we'll rest after that pose. So this one is the Dragonfly, and you'll notice I'm just turning to face the long side of my mat so that my feet or legs stay on the mat. That's not really that important, so if you want to continue just facing that direction, that's perfectly fine. So my legs this is about as wide as my legs will go. You might have seen people whose legs are out at a 180 degree angle. Those are people whose their hip bones are shaped in a certain way. Not everyone can do that. It doesn't matter how much stretching you do. I've been doing this for a long time. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to do that. And it's not important that I do. I'm not a dancer, a gymnast, and it's not important for yoga. So the idea is to go as wide as you can to get a stretch in here, and then again also in the back. Once again, you can use as much or as little support as you like. So again, forearms, forehead. Obviously the knees are not an issue here. Sitting on something you can do as well. And again, not required. When I'm working on my keyword stuff for YouTube, one thing that comes up a lot is yin yoga without props. Well, yin yoga, you don't need props to do yin yoga. It's not to say that they can't be helpful or useful. It's not to say that some people might require props, but yin yoga by no means is really a practice that requires props most of the time. There might be a couple of poses that aren't even really part of the original yin vocabulary of postures that require props, but they're by no means really essential postures. I still teach them from time to time because it's good to change things up, but by no means required or that important. We can stick with the original postures, pretty much none of which require props. So please don't think that you're being encouraged to use props if you don't need them. In fact, from my perspective, just the opposite. Unless you really need the props, don't use them. So just coming forward and down, feeling the stretch in here, feeling the stretch in our back. And again, we'll just take our time here. We're about 1.5 minutes in, okay? Okay, so this time we'd like to come up and then eventually back onto our back, taking your time and with as little counter stretching as possible. So you just gradually come on back and relax. And we call that a rebound in yin yoga. Okay, now let's bring our legs in. We'll give them a little squeeze and shake out the remaining discomfort or imbalance that might be there from that last set of 2 postures. And just moving, randomly at first, and then letting the feedback that you get from your body guide you on what to do more or less of. And then before we continue, we'll use the hinge to stabilize hips and spine. So hands under the hips, palms down. Extend the legs. If there's any pain in your back, you just bend your knees until that pain goes away. And then lift the head and neck, take a nice deep breath, exhale, lower the legs toward the ground, and just before they touch, pause, inhale, and then exhale back onto your back. Okay, banana or Bananasana is next. The first thing I recommend is go ahead and move your hips over to the right edge of your mat, like so. And then take your left leg, move it to the left, cross the right ankle over the left. Extend the arms up overhead and grab the right wrist with your left hand. Okay, now if you already feel stretch in your right waist, then just stay right there. But if you don't, and I don't, then you will scooch or wiggle your head, neck, shoulders, and arms further to the left. Okay, and then you should feel a stretch in your right waist and ribs. So scooch is a Sanskrit term that means move. So just move yourself over to the left more. Now, as always, we want to feel the stretch, but we want to feel that our body is within the range of what is safe for it to do. So the 2 areas that tend to be problematic in this posture are the waist. Sometimes people will feel pinching in their left side. There's not really too much you can do about that except to experiment with the position of your body to try and find a position where the pinching is not quite as exaggerated. The other area that can be problematic is actually in the arms. If you have a shoulder injury like I have had over the past few months, then extending your arm up like this can be painful. And so what you'd want to do is find a different position for the arms, one that wasn't painful, but where you still felt the stretch in your right waist. The only other difficulty a student has ever reported to me in this posture is a student I used to teach private yoga to had a tailbone birth defect. And when she would do this posture, it would make her tailbone hurt. And so we did some experimentation, and we found that if she just reversed the cross of her legs like this, that was enough to cause that discomfort or pain to go away. Now, you might be thinking, well, why is that? That seems like such a small change. That doesn't make sense. Well, one thing I learned from my yin teacher, Paul Grilly, who taught me anatomy as well, You don't have to understand. The body is so incredibly complex to start. And then, in addition to that, all bodies are unique. So the fact that you're going to figure out why this woman crossing one leg over the other instead of the other way around, you're going to figure that out, not even having studied anatomy, or even if you did, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to figure it out. Even if you're a surgeon or a doctor, you may not be able to figure it out. The human body is really a mystery, and we might know a little bit about it, but I would say we probably know just enough to be dangerous. So we don't need to understand why something works, why something reduces pain for somebody, why something is more comfortable for someone. All we need to know is that that's the case, and then we move forward from there. Got about 1.5 minutes left here. Okay, so please take your time gradually making your way to the other side. Again, the suggestion to move your hips over is just that. It's a suggestion. In fact, you could say almost everything that I say in the class is ultimately a suggestion. Again, we want to be sure we feel the stretch in the left waist and ribs and maybe down into the hip as well. But our left side is stretching. And then on top of that, again, we feel we're safe with what we're doing with our body. A little over a minute left here. Okay, we unwind, we come back to a neutral position and just relax for a moment. Again, it's part of the practice and it's called a rebound. Okay, once again, we'll draw our legs in, give them a little squeeze, move around a bit. This should feel good, just to be clear. So you're moving in a way that brings relief. Again, it feels good. The postures can sometimes feel like they build tension, and that's okay to some degree. So we are stretching when we're doing the yin postures, but this is just supposed to be a little bit of pleasant movement to get some blood flow going. And then let's go ahead and hinge on up to seated. And once we're up, we'll transition to tabletop. This is called marauding bear. Move around a little bit, stretch out. And then you can do a little bit of the down dog. Same idea, just like the leg cradle, just moving a bit, stretching, getting the blood flowing. Okay, from there we're going to transition into either Sphinx or Seal. So to do Sphinx, just like the Sphinx in Egypt, you prop yourself up on your elbows, have your hands out in front of you like that. Generally, the elbows are under the shoulders. With your elbows further forward, it brings you lower. So if this is too much, you come lower like this. And then if this is too little, you have a few options. One is to prop yourself up on something like that, a little bit deeper. And the other option, again, you do not have to have props to do yin. The other option is to just straighten your arms like that, and that's called a seal pose. Hands are a little wider usually, creates a little bit of a more stable base. You see I'm moving my hands back, that takes me even deeper into the back bend. So some other things to consider in this posture are your legs together or apart? Are you tensing the muscles in your buttocks and your thighs, or are you relaxing them? Is your head held up, dropped forward, or dropped back? Are your shoulders depressed or relaxed? And like so many things in yin yoga, there's no one right answer because there isn't one right body type. Everyone's body is different. Everyone's got a different age, a different medical history, right? Different injuries that we've sustained throughout our lives. And I don't know why this isn't obvious, but it's not for some reason. Many people try and teach yoga as though there's one right way to do it and that all the other ways are incorrect. Now, having said that, there might be one right way for you. So if you have a certain injury or certain body type, you might find that a lot of the options I just mentioned aren't accessible to you for one of two reasons. One is either it feels like you're injuring yourself. For instance, like this, some people with back injuries doing what I'm doing, they would injure themselves. They would re-injure themselves. They would aggravate their injury. So this is wrong for them. Does it mean I shouldn't do it? If I have a healthy, strong back, that I shouldn't do this because it's wrong for someone else? No. And this is unfortunately what often happens in yoga, is teachers will be overly conservative, in my opinion, and they will try and rein everybody in. And so everyone's doing what is appropriate for the lowest common denominator. And this might not be obvious, but it actually is dangerous in the long run, because people with healthy bodies, instead of making their body healthier or keeping their body healthy, they're beginning to act like a sick person. And as a result, their body is getting weaker. A good example of this might be thinking of somebody who is bedridden. There are certain conditions where the doctor says you should not get out of bed, right? There's certain medical conditions where the doctor says you should not get out of bed. You should stay in bed at least for a certain period of time. And for some people, that's a permanent condition. Now, what if I told you you can't get out of bed because there's somebody out there who the doctor told them not to get out of bed? Well, your health would begin to go down. This would also affect your mood and your energy level and your ability to think clearly. If you spent several days or weeks or months or even years in bed, it definitely affects you in many, many ways. Your health would go down. There's no question about it. You would lose bone mass, muscle mass. Again, it would affect the chemical makeup of your body and your brain, your nervous system. So we have to understand that we don't want to teach to the lowest common denominator. Just because somebody might get injured, it doesn't mean that everyone else needs to avoid doing the thing that might injure that person. So somebody might get injured doing the back bend as I'm doing it right now. It doesn't mean that none of us should do it. So I always try and encourage students to take responsibility for their own practice. They need to determine for themselves. They know better than I do what they're feeling, how intense it is. They know their medical history. They know their injuries much better than I ever will. So it really is important that everybody not look to the teacher for the ultimate guidance or decision about what to do, but look to themselves to feel in real time what is happening in their body. Okay, we're gradually going to lower down. Take your time. And then once you're down, you can rest one hand on top of the other, rest your forehead on the back of the hands. Okay, so now we'll do another back bend. Now the first and easiest option is to repeat what you just did. And I assure you, repeating postures has additional benefits. So you shouldn't think, well, I just did that, so I'm not going to benefit by doing it again. The body is changed and transformed through repetition. This is why musicians practice. Okay, it's through repetition of the thing that the body is really transformed. So repeating that, if that was difficult for you or hard for you, or even if it wasn't, just repeating it will tend to take the body further. Another option is coming back into the saddle pose. If you're familiar with saddle, feel free to do it. But there's a lot of details that goes into doing the posture, and I'm not going to get into it today because we have several options. So when this is the only option, I go over all the details in a lot of detail. Go over all the elements in a lot of detail. But today you have other options. So if you know how to do this safely and you want to choose this, go ahead. Final choice is, I said earlier, you don't have to have props, but you can use them. So the final choice is a supported bridge. If you have a block at home, come back onto your back, lift your hips up, and place the block under your pelvis. Okay, so it's not, my buttocks is not on the block, and my spine is not on the block, the pelvis is. Okay, now there are 3 different heights for the block, so you choose the one that's appropriate for you. And then, if you're doing this posture, you experiment with straightening your legs and bringing your arms up overhead. And the idea is to stretch the front of the body and gently compress the spine as well. Again, this arm position hurts a little bit for me because of my shoulder injury, so I can play around with the shoulder position and try and find something that's less irritating. About 3 minutes left here. And for me, this is feeling pretty intense today. Usually it's not. So I'm going to just bend my knees a little bit more, let off a little bit of the pressure in my back. And again, we can ask, well, why is that? And what's going on? And who knows? The body's constantly changing. We're using it in different ways. And again, it's so complex, and our bodies are different enough that we may never be able to explain why we feel what we feel. And this might sound like an excuse of a yoga teacher and that a doctor would be able to explain it. No. Doctors can't explain everything that they see in their patients. Sometimes patients complain of pain, and they do scans and surgeries and all kinds of things, and they can't pinpoint the pain or get rid of it. Other times they look at people's bodies and they assume they must be in a lot of pain because there's a lot of damage there. And they ask the patient, does your back hurt? Because you have lots of herniated discs.
And the patient responds, no, back's fine. So again, there's a lot more we don't know than we do know. Like I said earlier, I think we figured out just enough to be dangerous. Modern medicine and science, we know just enough to cause a lot of problems for ourselves. But there's much more, and this is a scientific fact that I'm stating here. This isn't something that I've come up with or that yoga says. This is a scientific fact. There's much more we don't know about reality, about our bodies, about the world in general than we do know. So it's a good idea to remember that. And I find that yoga teachers, doctors, scientists, politicians, everybody, we get into a lot of trouble when we forget that and when we think that we really have the final word on what's going on, or if we hear something from our doctor and we take that, necessarily to be the final word. There are examples of people who were told by their doctors that they would never walk again, and they end up doing yoga and eventually healing their body completely, and they're able to walk and even run. So there are documented cases of this. I'm not saying it's common, and I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to your doctor. But again, we really don't know what's possible. We really don't know what is and isn't possible. That's the truth. All we know is what we've seen in the past. So if someone had an incurable disease in the past, and that's all the doctor has seen, and that's all that's on record, then the doctor is going to say you have an incurable disease. Does that mean that it's really incurable? No. Maybe one day we will find the cure. Okay, let's go ahead and gradually come up out of this. Take your time. Back bends, again, can create a lot of sensitivity. I know I'm feeling it in my back. Some of you know that I hurt my back a couple of years ago. It took me probably a year and a half to really heal it fully. And it's been feeling really good lately, and I've been able to do really deep back bends. But today, for whatever reason, it's a little bit sensitive. So I want to respect and honor that limitation rather than try and push my body to where I think it should be able to go. Okay, we'll bring our legs in, give them a little squeeze. And again, you might feel really sensitive on your back. That's okay. Just be gentle in your movements. And then we will finish with a twist. And this is our most common twist in yin. It's called twisted roots. So I just take my right knee over my left, and I just drop the knees down to the left side. Feel free to play around with your knee, arm, and head position to generate the best, safest, most comfortable stretch for your body. Even though it's called a spinal twist, you may not feel much in your spine. I feel most of the stretch in my shoulder, a bit in my back, and in the outside of my hip and waist. If your knees are in the air or your shoulders in the air and you want to support them with a block or a blanket, feel free. But I'll just let you know my knees are in the air and my shoulder, my right shoulder, is off the ground. Now I could force one of them down. I could push my knees down like that, or I could push my shoulder down like that. But neither one of those positions is better than the other inherently. Again, one of them might be better for you. But again, generally speaking, one is not better. And I just like kind of balancing between the two. If you feel better with some support, by all means, use it. Okay, so gradually making your way over to the other side. Same idea here. So left over right, knees down to the right. And I highly recommend experimenting with the arm, leg, and head position to find the one that's optimal for you today. And I do want to emphasize that today because, again, next week or even tomorrow or even later today, your body may feel different than it does now.
so we gradually unwind, coming back onto our back again. And that's the rebound. And then we can bring our legs in, give them a little squeeze, shake it out a bit. And then what I recommend is you come back onto your back. In yin, we call this a pentacle pose. So it's just relaxing on your back in a comfortable position. And then you just close your eyes and allow your body to be still for the next few minutes. I recommend about 5 or 6 minutes. All right, yogins, so I really hope you enjoyed that yin class, basic yin. Again, thanks to all my patrons on Patreon and everyone who's contributed to make these videos possible. If you'd like to become one of those people, check out the links below. Please subscribe, comment, hit the bell icon, and let me know if you have any questions. Have a wonderful day, and namaste.